In 1979, a Japanese company invented portable music. They sold 385 million units. They defined an entire generation. 22 years later, an American company took the same idea, built it slightly better, and made Sony's product irrelevant in less than 5 years. The story of why is not about technology. It is about a corporate decision Sony made on purpose. And once you understand that decision, you will see it being made again, right now, by other companies. The Walkman was launched on July 1st, 1979. It was the project of Akio Morita, the co-founder of Sony, who wanted a small player that his business partners could use during long flights. The first model, the TPS L2, weighed 390 grams, ran on 2 AA batteries, and cost the equivalent of about $700 in today's money. Sony's marketing team predicted they would sell 5,000 units in the first month. They sold 30,000. Within 5 years, the Walkman had become one of the best-selling consumer electronics products in history. By 1989, Sony had sold over 50 million units. By 1995, the number was over 150 million. By 1999, the year before the iPod was announced, Sony's portable music division was generating over $4 billion in annual revenue and held a dominant position in a market it had created 20 years earlier. That same year, in Cupertino, an unknown product team at Apple was being asked to build a music player. This is where the story usually skips ahead to 2001 and the iPod launch. But the gap between 1999 and 2001 is the most important part of this story because it is when Sony made the decision that destroyed them. In 1999, music was changing. Napster had launched in June. MP3 files were spreading. The CD format was being undermined by a smaller, lossier file that anyone with an internet connection could obtain for free. The portable music industry, which had spent 2 decades selling cassettes, CDs, and mini discs, was facing a categorical shift. Sony had 2 assets that should have made them invincible in this transition. They owned the dominant portable music brand. They also owned a major record label, Sony Music, which had a catalog of millions of songs. In theory, Sony could have built the world's first integrated digital music player and store. They had the device hardware. They had the music rights. They had the brand. They did not build it. The reason they did not build it is the most instructive part of this story. Sony Music's executives, who reported up through a different part of the company than Sony's hardware engineers, were terrified of digital music. They saw MP3 files as a threat to their CD sales business. They lobbied internally for any Sony music device to use a proprietary, copy-protected format called ATRAC. They wanted devices that would not play MP3s, would not allow easy file transfer, and would force users to convert their music through a clunky desktop application that Sony controlled. The hardware engineers at Sony pushed back. They knew the market would not accept a device that refused to play the most common file format in the world. They proposed an MP3-compatible Walkman. They were overruled. In 1999, Sony released the memory stick Walkman. It only played ATRAC files. It required a Sony-only software application. It could not transfer MP3 files in their original format. It cost $400. Reviews were brutal. Sales were disappointing. Sony did not change course. They released a second memory stick Walkman in 2000. They released a network Walkman in 2001. Every device used the same proprietary format. Every device required the Sony software. Every device refused to behave like the file system the rest of the world was actually using. In October of 2001, Apple released the iPod. It was a 5-gigabyte hard drive in a small white case with a click wheel. It could hold 1,000 songs. It plugged into iTunes. iTunes accepted MP3 files without modification. The total interaction was drag your music library into iTunes, plug in the iPod, wait, unplug. Sony's executives, when shown the iPod, did not panic. They believed Apple's product would fail because Apple did not own a music label and could not negotiate with the industry the way Sony could. They believed the proprietary format strategy would protect their CD business. They believed customers would prefer the Sony brand. By 2003, the iPod had captured 31% of the US portable music market. By 2004, that number was 52%. By 2005, when iTunes Store launched and offered legal song downloads at 99 cents each, Sony's CD business was already in irreversible decline. By 2006, the Walkman was effectively a niche product in its home country and had vanished from most of the world. Sony's portable music revenue had collapsed by more than 80% in 5 years. The mistake that destroyed Sony's lead in portable music was not a technology mistake. It was an organizational mistake. Sony had 2 divisions that should have been collaborating. Sony Music wanted to protect CD revenue. Sony Hardware wanted to make a device people would actually buy. The hardware team understood that the future was MP3 compatibility. The music team refused to allow it. There was no executive above both divisions willing or able to force the music team to give up their short-term revenue protection in exchange for the long-term survival of the hardware business. Apple did not have this problem. Apple did not own a music label. Apple's only goal was to sell devices. So Apple's iPod was designed for the user, not for the protection of an internal revenue stream. This pattern is not historical. It is happening right now at multiple companies on multiple categories of products. It happened at Kodak, which invented the digital camera in 1975 but refused to push it because it would have eroded their film business. The first digital camera was sitting in a Kodak engineer's lab for 18 years before Kodak commercialized it. By the time they did, Canon, Nikon, and Sony itself had taken over the market. It happened at Blockbuster, which had the chance to acquire Netflix for $50 million in 2000 and turned it down because their store rental business was more profitable in the short term. It is happening right now, in real time, at companies that own both legacy distribution and the technology that would replace it. Newspapers that own the printing presses they need to retire. Cable companies that own the streaming platforms they should be promoting. Automotive manufacturers that build internal combustion vehicles and electric ones in the same building, with the internal combustion teams politically dominant. The lesson from the Sony Walkman is not that Sony's engineers were wrong. They were not. They knew what was needed. They proposed it. They were overruled by a different division of their own company that had more political power and a stronger short-term revenue stream to protect. When you see a market leader hesitating to compete with itself, do not assume they have not noticed the threat. They have. They have already had the meeting where someone proposed the right product. They have already decided not to build it. They will continue to make the wrong choice for as long as the people protecting the legacy business have more power inside the company than the people building the future. That is usually until the legacy business is already collapsing, at which point it is too late. Sony invented the future of music in 1979. They watched a competitor take it from them between 2001 and 2005. They watched it happen because of a decision they made on purpose, knowing what would happen and unable to stop themselves. If you found this interesting, subscribe. We go deep on the structural reasons companies, countries, and industries make decisions that look obvious in hindsight. Drop your requests in the comments. Thanks for watching.